In the summer of 1867, a small farming community outside Sedalia, Missouri, confronted a horror none of them had the language to name. The townspeople knew the Caldwell place, 30 acres of hard soil, a weathered house, an uncle and aunt scraping by, and the quiet 8-year-old boy who'd arrived there in 1866 with a cloth bag and watchful pale blue eyes. His name was Timothy. To most, he was polite, tireless, almost eager to please. But to Dr. Samuel Harding, the region's sole formally trained physician, something felt wrong from the very first meeting. The child answered well, stood still, and held the doctor's gaze, with a level curiosity Harding usually saw only in adult clinicians. It was like being examined in return. Missouri, still raw from the Civil War, was a place of rebuild and grief. Timothy's Uncle Thomas had lost family to battle and prison, his Aunt Sarah to years of childless strain. They needed hands for the farm. A child who never complained felt like a blessing. Then the accidents began. On a blistering August afternoon in 1866, 5-year-old Mary Fletcher wandered near Willow Creek and did not return. Timothy appeared at the blacksmith's door, clothes damp, voice steady. "I found Mary by the creek," he said. "She's not breathing." They found her face down in water barely 18 inches deep. Dr. Harding pronounced drowning. Tragic, not unusual. What unsettled him was the boy's description. Limb position, a snagged dress, the brownish swirl of creek water. Timothy recited details with eerie precision, unusual for a frightened child. When the doctor asked why he'd been there, Timothy said he'd been sent to find a missing calf. The calf turned up 2 days later, grazing far from the creek. At the funeral, Timothy sat perfectly still, head bowed, eyes dry. Neighbors chalked it up to shock. Mrs. Patterson, who farmed next door, noticed something else. Her chickens panicked whenever the boy walked the fence line. 3 weeks later, a retired logger, Henrik Larson, was found at the base of Devil's Bluff, neck broken. Timothy said he saw the man's hat caught on a thorn and climbed down. Bees lay dead around the body, far too many, all in a tight ring. Harding climbed to the bluff. The hives were intact, no signs of disturbance. A fall explained the break. The scene did not explain the bees. In September, 6-year-old Jacob Mills vanished in woods near his family's cabin. Timothy joined the search and navigated the terrain like a surveyor. On day 4, he announced he'd heard crying near an abandoned well hidden under brush and logs. Jacob was there, alive, barely. He died within hours from exposure. The well bothered Harding. The debris wasn't random. It had been arranged, a natural camouflage someone had built. He could not prove the thought that followed. He wrote anyway. Harding began writing in earnest that October. Livestock died across neighboring farms in ways that looked accidental, but didn't feel accidental up close. Chickens' necks were broken cleanly. Calves tangled themselves on ropes that had never tangled before. A prize bull fell into a ditch no sure-footed animal would miss. Timothy was often seen, polite and waving, near the fence line before each misfortune. At the Caldwell house, the boy hovered during medical visits. He asked about anatomy, about what signs proved a person had died, about how long suffering lasted. Harding occasionally fed him deliberate half-truths, a fatality here, a symptom there, to test whether the boy would challenge him. Timothy never corrected the doctor out loud. He simply absorbed the data. "Did they scream when you cut off their arms?" Timothy once asked about battlefield surgery. "Or were they too hurt to make noise?" Harding did not forget the chill that followed. By November, he had 2 journals filled with observations. A child who understood violence like a trained adult and seemed unburdened by empathy. Observations weren't evidence. He needed something undeniable. The chance arrived when Thomas Caldwell injured his back during harvest. Daily visits gave Harding a reason to linger. Timothy mentioned a cave where he went to think. Inside, Harding found bones sorted by type, crude tools filed to points, and drawings, skillful, labeled, systematic. Rabbits, squirrels, birds, dissected, annotated with times to death, reactions to pain, the effects of pressure on the throat. Then the human sketches, a small girl whose likeness was unmistakably Mary Fletcher, an older man at a cliff's edge, a child at the bottom of a well. Notes estimated dehydration timelines and methods to induce panic. Harding had what he needed morally, not legally. He knew any search would be contested. He also knew the boy would escalate. Harding confided in Sheriff William Crawford, a war veteran with no patience for superstition. The two agreed. They couldn't arrest a child for drawings, but they could protect the aunt and uncle, watch the boy, and intervene at the first sign of harm. Harding would visit as usual. He would keep Thomas and Sarah sedated for pain, and deputies would wait just out of sight. At dawn, the farm was wrong, quiet in a way that warns predators are near. Timothy stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled high, hands scrubbed raw. "I've been waiting for you," he said. Inside, Thomas and Sarah breathed shallowly, skin ashy. "What did you give them?" Harding asked. "Herbs," Timothy said. "Interesting plants grow around here." They would sleep for hours, the boy explained, and then he began to talk, calm, professorial, as if leading a lesson. "Mary." He pushed her head under water and timed the struggle. "Henrik!" He loosened stones at the bluff, bagged bees, threw them into the man's face, shouted about a swarm, and watched panic do the rest. "Jacob?" He lured him with talk of baby raccoons, helped him into the well, covered the opening, rationed water to prolong consciousness, and visited to observe decline. "What will you do next?" Harding asked. "I need to know what happens when you hurt someone who trusts you completely," Timothy said, and looked toward the bedroom. The boy gathered rope, a candlestick, knives arranged with surgical neatness. Harding drew his pistol. "Step away," he said. Timothy regarded the gun like a specimen. 6 shots, he said lightly. "And 6 people to protect. Yourself, 2 Caldwells, and the 3 outside." He moved fast. The knife flashed. Harding's arm burned. The doctor grappled, wrenched the blade free, only for a second knife to appear. The struggle burst the quiet open. Deputies crashed through the door, dragging Timothy away as the aunt and uncle slept on, oblivious to the violence planned at their bedside. "You can't prove anything," Timothy said, bloodied but composed. "No one believes a child did this." "Attempting to kill your family," Sheriff Crawford said, "is proof enough." In 1867, there were no rules for prosecuting an 8-year-old for murder. Prosecutors argued for adult charges. Defenders insisted on trauma and innocence. The compromise sent Timothy to the Missouri State Hospital in Fulton to be studied by alienists, early psychiatrists, under strict supervision. Harding went with him for 3 months, observing, recording. Timothy adapted quickly. He cried on cue, said all the right things, expressed remorse that sounded true, and convinced a few staff members he was recovering. Harding wasn't fooled. He watched the boy practice people, how a nurse softened at certain phrases, how a doctor's suspicion dropped after a particular expression, how gratitude, once mirrored convincingly, opened doors. A journal turned up, childlike entries about feelings and hopes, until doctor. Martha Fitzgerald noticed a pattern. The notebook hid a cipher. Decoded, it mapped the hospital's routines, staff vulnerabilities, and staged performances with notations like Day 47, tears accepted as authentic. 3 more weeks to establish trust, sufficient for physical contact. Security tightened. Access narrowed. Timothy simply shifted tactics from performance to preparation. In the summer of 1868, he was gone. The official story said he slipped away during a supervised transfer. Harding's final report suggested something colder. Months of tiny exceptions granted by staff who believed they were helping. An extra book here, a longer walk there, until all the small doors aligned into one exit. Harding began clipping reports across the Midwest. Accidents too carefully staged to be chance. Animals tortured with method. A helpful child present in the margins. None were proof. All were consistent. He spent the rest of his life writing about what Timothy represented. A mind that understood human behavior with predatory clarity and felt no obligation to it at all. Thomas and Sarah left the farm and changed their names. The county sealed the cave. Locals avoided that valley for years. Harding's journals, 3 leather volumes and more, would be archived long after his death in 1891, cited by later generations as an early, disturbing window into antisocial behavior in children. The hospital kept its own file. Unexplained patient deaths labeled natural causes. 2 suspicious falls. Nurses plagued by nightmares and the sensation of being watched. None of it stuck to a name once the boy vanished. What remains is the shape of a story that refuses to sit quietly in the past. A doctor notices that a child is looking back at him like a mirror. A town mistakes obedience for goodness. A cave teaches that careful hands can hide cruelty as neat lines and notes. The law, made for adults, meets a predator still small enough to be led by the hand. And somewhere beyond the record, a boy who learned to perform feelings better than most people feel them, walked out of a building and kept going. The case of Timothy Caldwell forces an ugly question. What do we call evil when it wears the face of a child and understands us better than we understand ourselves? In the 1860s, there was no vocabulary for that. Today, there are terms and checklists, but names don't soften the fact. If Timothy reached adulthood, he did so with a blueprint for manipulation and a lifetime head start. That's why this story endures. It isn't just about a farm, a creek, and a cave. It's about the danger of assuming innocence where we are most comforted to see it, and the cost of mistaking performance for change. What do you think the record missed? Was everything truly uncovered, or did Timothy's story continue in places the journals never reached?